You're not lazy. You're not broken. But something's off, isn't it? You wake up already exhausted. You reach for your phone before even getting out of bed. You make big promises to yourself. Today will be different, but nothing changes. The day slips away again, and that little voice in your head whispers, "What's wrong with me?" Here's the truth. You're not lazy. You're undisciplined. And that's not a moral failure. It's a fixable problem. It's not a personality flaw. It's a skill you haven't trained. The ancient Stoics didn't wait for motivation. They didn't depend on mood. They used something far more powerful: reason, practice, and virtue. And today, we're going to show you how you can use Stoic philosophy to master discipline. Starting right now. The ancient solution. We live in an age where every failure is quickly labeled as laziness. Struggling to stick to a routine? Must be lazy. Can't get out of bed some mornings? You're told it's a lack of ambition. You miss a deadline or avoid a task, and the label gets slapped on: lazy, unmotivated, undisciplined. But what if I told you this wasn't just wrong? It was dangerously misleading. Because here's the truth. You're not lazy. You're overwhelmed, untrained, and disconnected from something deeper. What you lack is not effort, but philosophy. A system for making sense of your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. And this is where Stoicism comes in. Stoicism isn't some outdated, emotionless way of thinking. It's a practical philosophy developed over 2,000 years ago by thinkers who lived through real adversity: wars, exile, illness, betrayal, and power. And yet, despite everything life threw at them, these men didn't crumble. They didn't fall into despair. They endured. More than that, they thrived. At its core, Stoicism teaches one powerful idea. We do not control what happens to us, but we absolutely control how we respond. Think about that. You can't control the economy, or your boss, or your childhood, or the way someone treats you. But you can control your thoughts, your choices, your discipline, and your mindset. And that control? That is the seed of power. The ancient Stoics knew this, and they lived by it. Take Marcus Aurelius, for example. He was emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world. But during his reign, he faced constant war, disease, personal loss, and betrayal. And instead of complaining or collapsing under pressure, what did he do? He wrote. In his personal journal, now known as Meditations, he reminded himself, day after day, of who he wanted to be. He wrote things like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's not just self-help fluff. That's a battle-tested strategy for building discipline and resilience. Marcus wasn't writing for history. He was writing for survival, to keep himself grounded, focused, and emotionally in control in the face of chaos. Now let's bring that wisdom to you. You don't need to be emperor of Rome to face pressure. You deal with your own battles every single day. Anxiety, self-doubt, procrastination, failure, rejection. And just like Marcus, you have a choice. Let these things control you, or take control of your response. Stoicism hands you the mental framework to do that. It says, stop waiting for motivation. Stop blaming your circumstances. Start acting in alignment with your values. Even when you're tired. Even when you're scared. Even when it's hard. Because discipline isn't about feeling good. It's about doing what's right regardless of how you feel. So no, you're not lazy. You're out of alignment. Out of clarity. Out of practice. But with the right mindset, you can rebuild that alignment. You can reclaim control. And that's exactly what the Stoics want to teach you. This video isn't just about getting more done. It's about becoming someone different, someone stronger, calmer, more resilient. The version of you who doesn't need hype to act. who doesn't need to feel inspired to show up. The version of you who lives with intention and walks with purpose, just like the Stoics did. This is the ancient solution. Not trendy, not loud, but timeless and powerful. Are you ready to use it? The real problem: why you feel lazy. Let's clear up one of the most damaging myths out there. That you're not doing what you need to do because you're lazy. That's the label we throw around when someone misses a deadline, skips a workout, or puts things off for too long. But laziness isn't your problem. The truth is, it's a symptom, not the cause. Here's what's really happening. You're at war with your own impulses. You want to act, but you don't. You want to improve, but something holds you back. You feel stuck. Not because you're unwilling, but because you haven't trained your will. And in that gap between desire and action, people assume laziness. But the Stoics saw something very different. According to the Stoics, you're not born disciplined. No one is. Discipline is a skill, like lifting weights or learning a language. It takes conscious practice, effort, and repetition. What you're missing is not drive, but training. You have never been taught how to govern yourself, how to respond instead of react, how to act even when you don't feel like it. And in a world full of distractions and constant comfort, that training is harder to come by than ever before. Think about how our modern lives are built. Everything is designed to be instant, convenient, and addictive. Food, entertainment, social media. It's all optimized to give you pleasure with minimal effort. And so your brain learns one thing: avoid discomfort. That becomes your autopilot. So when the time comes to do something hard, to write, to exercise, to study, to build, your brain rebels. It says, not now, later. Let's check our phone instead. That's not laziness. That's conditioning. The Stoics understood this dynamic deeply. Epictetus, who was born a slave, taught that most people are not free, not because of physical chains, but because of mental ones. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." You may live in a free country, but if you can't resist the impulse to procrastinate, to indulge, to escape, you're not truly free. You're ruled by your lower nature. But here's the good news. Stoicism doesn't blame you for that. It doesn't shame you. It equips you. When you feel unmotivated or avoidant, the Stoics wouldn't say, "Try harder." They'd say, "Examine your thoughts. Are you acting from reason, or from habit, from discipline, or from emotion?" That moment of reflection, that pause before you act, is where freedom begins. Because when you start noticing your inner resistance and choosing action anyway, that's when discipline is born. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being.' Not because it's easy, not because it's fun, but because it's right." He didn't wait to feel like it. He reminded himself of his duty. And that small act, getting out of bed with purpose, became his daily training in self-mastery. So when you feel that inner voice saying, "I'm just lazy," stop. Don't label yourself. Investigate yourself. Ask, what thoughts am I believing? What discomfort am I avoiding? What value am I betraying? That's how the Stoic mind works. Not with judgment, but with inquiry, with curiosity, with courage. The real problem isn't laziness. It's disconnection. Disconnection from your goals, from your values, from your power to choose. The more you train that connection, through awareness, through action, through philosophy, the stronger you become. So no, you're not lazy. You're untrained, unstructured, and that can change starting today. The emotional journey. Lessons from a Stoic emperor. Let's step into ancient Rome, into the sandals of a man who would become the most powerful person on earth. Not by ambition, but by duty. His name? Marcus Aurelius. philosopher, emperor, and perhaps one of the greatest examples of Stoic discipline the world has ever seen. Marcus didn't ask for power. He didn't campaign for it. In fact, he likely didn't even want it. At just 19 years old, he was pulled into the epicenter of one of history's most powerful empires. Imagine that, being handed command over millions of people, armies, laws, and life-or-death decisions, all while still figuring out who you are. Now, most people think, if I had that kind of power, I'd be unstoppable. Life would be easy. But Marcus Aurelius' reign was anything but easy. He faced nearly constant war. The empire was under siege from Germanic tribes in the north, while political enemies brewed conspiracies back in Rome. On top of that, a devastating plague, likely smallpox, swept through the empire, killing millions. And while all this was happening, Marcus suffered deep personal tragedies. He lost multiple children, dealt with chronic illness, and battled betrayal from those closest to him. So how did he hold it all together? How did he maintain not just composure, but compassion, wisdom, and discipline? He did something radical. He wrote, not speeches, not propaganda, but a private journal. In the quiet of the early morning or the late evening, Marcus would sit down and write meditations to himself, reminders, challenges, and philosophical notes to keep him anchored in virtue. This journal was never meant to be read by others. It was raw, unfiltered thought, a manual for living, by a man constantly fighting his own weaknesses. In it, you find gems like, you have power over your mind, not outside events. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. These weren't platitudes. They were tools, mental weapons he forged to confront fear, fatigue, doubt, and despair. He wasn't writing because he felt strong. He wrote to become strong. This is what makes Marcus so remarkable. He didn't pretend to be superhuman. He felt the same temptations we do, to give up, to complain, to avoid hard choices. But he used philosophy to transform his emotions into fuel. When others crumbled under pressure, he turned to reason. When others ran from pain, he used it to grow. One of the most profound lessons from his life is this. Discipline isn't about forcing yourself to act. It's about guiding yourself to act. It's about developing an internal compass so strong that even in the darkest hour, you still move forward with intention. Marcus Aurelius could have been a tyrant. He could have drowned in luxury or delegated responsibility. Instead, he chose to wake up early, reflect on his purpose, and live with restraint, courage, and humility. He chose discipline, not once, but every single day. And the reason he could do that was because he had a philosophy, and that same philosophy is available to you. You may not rule an empire, but you're still in charge of something far more important. Yourself, your time, your habits, your choices. And just like Marcus, you'll face hardship. You'll face noise, fear, and temptation. But you can also choose to write your own pages, to journal, to reflect, to act, and to discipline your mind. Because as Marcus Aurelius taught, true power isn't about conquering others. It's about conquering yourself. The Stoic fix, 3 pillars of discipline. So, how do you actually build discipline? Not the kind that fades after a motivational video or dies after 2 good days, but real, lasting discipline that anchors your actions even when life gets messy? The Stoics didn't rely on feelings to guide their behavior. They built a system, a mental framework designed to create strength of character. And at the heart of that system are 3 timeless pillars. Master these, and you'll never call yourself lazy again. Pillar 1, clarity of purpose. The first step in discipline is knowing why you act. The Stoics believe that we must live according to nature, Meaning, we must live in line with our highest self. That starts with purpose. Without it, you're like a ship without a rudder, drifting, reacting, and eventually crashing into whatever life throws your way. Marcus Aurelius asked himself each morning, "What is my duty as a human being?" That wasn't a vague question. He meant, what is required of me today? As a father, a leader, a philosopher, a man? You don't need to be an emperor to ask the same. You need to define your why. Why do you want to wake up earlier? Why do you want to study, build, train, or grow? If your answer is shallow, like because I should or because everyone else is doing it, your motivation will vanish at the first sign of resistance. But if your why is strong, if it's tied to your values, your future, your principles, then discipline becomes easier. You're not forcing yourself to act. You're aligning your actions with your identity. Pillar 2. Mastery over emotion. Let's be honest. Most of the time, you know what to do. You're just not doing it. Why? Because emotion gets in the way. Fear, doubt, comfort, resentment. The Stoics saw emotion not as the enemy, but as something to be governed. Not suppressed, but mastered. Epictetus taught, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. That's a crucial shift. You're not overwhelmed because life is hard. You're overwhelmed because you're interpreting your challenges as unbearable. You're not avoiding the gym because it's impossible. You're avoiding it because you've decided discomfort is something to flee. Discipline, then, isn't about killing emotion. It's about rising above it. It's about catching the thought that says, "I'll do it later," and replying, "That's a lie." It's about facing fear and choosing courage anyway. You train this mastery by pausing, by learning to observe your impulses without obeying them. That's Stoicism in practice. Pillar 3. Consistent right action. Finally, the Stoics taught that wisdom without action is worthless. Discipline doesn't live in your thoughts. It lives in your calendar, in your habits, in your decisions, big and small. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, don't waste time debating what a good man should be. Be one. That's the essence of Stoic action, clarity, emotion mastery, and then do the work, even when it's boring, even when no one's watching. Discipline is built in the moments when you choose effort over ease. When you wake up early even though it's cold. When you sit down to write even though your mind resists. When you say no to temptation, not out of punishment, but out of power. That action compounds. Day by day, you build momentum. You become trustworthy. Not just to others, but to yourself. And that trust? That's the foundation of self-respect. It's what turns discipline into identity. Final thought. You don't need hacks. You don't need motivation. You need a system. The Stoic fix isn't flashy. It's not exciting, but it works. Know your purpose. Govern your emotions. Take right action. Consistently. That's it. That's the recipe for becoming someone who acts with strength and clarity, no matter the chaos around them. Transformation. The new you. Let's stop for a moment and look at what happens when you begin living by the Stoic pillars. When you start showing up with clarity, mastering your emotions, and taking consistent action, you start becoming someone unrecognizable. Not to the world first, to yourself. Because here's the truth no one tells you. The biggest reward of discipline isn't achievement, it's identity change. You stop seeing yourself as someone who wants to be disciplined and start becoming someone who is. It's no longer a goal, it's your nature. You wake up and think, this is just what I do. You go to the gym even when you're tired. You turn off distractions when it's time to work. You respond calmly to stress, not because you're forcing it, but because this is who you are now. And once that transformation begins, the momentum becomes unstoppable. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations to impress anyone. He wrote to protect that transformation. Every entry was a way to reinforce who he was becoming, a man of reason, strength, and service. And just like him, you'll need reminders, daily rituals, journaling, moments of silence, to stay aligned with your highest self. It won't always feel dramatic. In fact, most of your growth will be invisible. No applause, no fanfare, just small wins, repeated with discipline. You choose the better option in moments no one else sees. You say no to excuses. You start acting like the person your future self will thank you for. That quiet strength? That's what separates the Stoic path from the motivational hype. It's not loud. It's not sexy. It's built brick by brick on the foundation of self-respect. Imagine yourself 30 days from now, applying the Stoic fix daily. You've built a routine around your purpose. You no longer get swept away by emotion. You finish what you start. You feel control where there used to be chaos. You speak less and do more. Not because you read something cool, but because you lived it. Now zoom out. 6 months, a year. What would your life look like if you kept applying these principles? How many goals would you accomplish? Not because you were constantly inspired, but because you were finally consistent. The Stoics didn't aim to be extraordinary. They aimed to be virtuous, to live in accordance with their highest values. And when you do that, day in and day out, extraordinary becomes inevitable. This is your rebirth. The shedding of the old skin, the procrastinator, the overthinker, the excuse maker, and the emergence of a new identity, calm, deliberate, grounded, unshakable. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You were simply untrained. But now, you're becoming something else, something rare, something stoic. Your move. Become who you're meant to be. So here you are. You've heard the truth. You're not lazy. You're undisciplined. But that's not an insult. It's an invitation, a challenge, a wake-up call. Because if discipline is a skill, then you can train it. If emotion is a storm, then you can learn to sail through it. And if your purpose feels buried, then you can dig it up and build a life around it. The Stoics didn't believe in waiting. They didn't believe in someday. They believed in action. Here now, in this moment. Marcus Aurelius said it best. You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow. That's the lie you've believed. Tomorrow I'll be better. Tomorrow I'll start. But tomorrow is a trick, a mirage, a delay tactic dressed in hope. There's only one day you control. Today. Today is when you decide to stop negotiating with weakness. Today is when you take your time seriously. Today is when you sit down, breathe, and choose what's right over what's easy. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to do a 180 overnight. You just need to make one clear decision. I am done being a slave to my impulses. That's the moment it all changes. That's the day the new you is born. From now on, you apply the Stoic fix. You define your purpose. You take inventory of your thoughts. You act consistently, calmly, and with integrity. This won't make you robotic. It will make you resilient. It will make you someone who still feels emotion, but who acts from reason. Someone who earns self-respect by building evidence every single day. And here's what's wild. The world around you will start to shift. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You'll handle stress differently. You'll stop chasing dopamine. You'll stop asking, what do I feel like doing? And start asking, what will my best self do? That shift in question changes everything. So, if this message hit you, if you felt stuck, guilty, behind, then take this as your signal. Not just to think differently, but to live differently. Because your future self is waiting, and they're counting on you to show up. Stop sign no more scrolling. Hammer and wrench start building. Notebook grab a journal. Thought balloon reflect on your purpose. Crossed swords face the discomfort. Brick take the smallest action today. And if you're ready to commit, to walk the Stoic path and stop being ruled by chaos, then this is your moment. Subscribe, because we're diving deeper into self-mastery, ancient philosophy, and the battle for inner strength. But more importantly, look in the mirror right now and say it. I am not lazy. I am becoming disciplined, and nothing will stop me.